to part 2 of this watercolor painting. For those of you who joined me for part 1, I just want to say thank you so much. Your support and your kind comments have just blown me away. I am just so thankful to have you guys on this channel with me and learning together. So to finish this, we're going to be taking a little bit more of a step-by-step approach, and I'm going to provide you with everything you need to finish this painting with confidence. So first, we're going to talk about supplies, do a little bit of a review of our techniques. You're going to see me tackle some of the little tricky areas of this painting, and I've also provided you with a traceable download that you can print from your own computer and trace onto your watercolor paper so that you can follow along. And if you haven't seen part 1, you're definitely going to want to watch that video first. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's talk about supplies. Arches watercolor paper, 140-pound cold press, is my absolute go-to favorite paper. If you're struggling at all with your watercolors and you're not using a quality cotton paper, that could be a big part of what's going on for you. So definitely get something like this. You can get it in pads or sheets. Either way works, and so that's what you're going to want for paper. Okay, and now for brushes, I have a couple of brands here. I have the Artegria round brushes. These actually come in a large set, but they're very affordable on Amazon. The ones I use all the time are the 10, 8, and 6. I really can't say I use the other ones all that much, so I have these. I also like the Simply Simon's brushes. These are actually a firmer brush. Unlike the Artegria, which are a softer brush, it's kind of hard to tell until you work with it, but these soft brushes hold a lot of water, so I really like using them in the early stages of the painting when I'm working more wet on wet. However, these brushes, again, I have it 6, 8, and 10 round. In the Simply Simon's brushes, these are a super inexpensive brush as well, but they're a firmer brush and they hold less water, and I really like using them when I get into more of the detailed stages of my painting. I actually started out as a beginning watercolorist with the Simply Simon's brush. In fact, I just had a number 10 and I used it for a long time, but as you know from some of my videos now, you can see I like grabbing more than one brush. You definitely don't need all of these. If I was to recommend what to start with, I probably would just say maybe go with a few of the Simply Simon's brushes. You'd be probably good to go. And then here's another brush I like to have on hand. I think this is a shader brush that I use actually for scrubbing out mistakes. That's what I like it for. You can see it's got a really, it has really short bristles and a lot of kind of spring and stiffness in the bristles. So I don't really use it for painting. I use it for cleanup. And then for watercolor paint, I really like the M. Graham brand here. I've got my primaries, Hansa Yellow Deep, Quinacridone Rose, and Phthalo Cyanine Blue. I always just call it phthalo blue, as well as an ultramarine blue. You really don't need both of these blues so much, but I tend to use the ultramarine blue a little bit more when I want a more vibrant purple. And so I've had that on my palette recently, but for the most part, I really prefer to just work with these, but this is a nice one to have on hand and it's really popular. So you probably already have an ultramarine blue in your collection. And then of course I have some paper towel and a water jar on hand. Now I did something a little bit different with this particular painting here. Rather than just copy a single reference photo, which is generally what I do more or less, I decided to combine a couple of photos. So I used this white rose here, or really it's very, very washed out light pink, and I wanted more color in it. But I really liked the shape of the flower and I really liked the way the shadows look on the flower. You can see we got some really fun shadows to work with here. And so I copied the shapes, the shadows, everything from this white photo, or I should say light pink flower. And then I looked at this particular tulip just for some inspiration. You know, when I started this painting, I kind of started with some coral undertones that I really, really liked. And then I wanted to build in these shadow colors with kind of more of a purpley sort of pinky color. So that's what I ended up doing. You definitely don't have to work with more than one reference photo, but that's what I'm doing today. So I'm providing you both of these reference photo links in the description below. They both came from royalty-free reference photo sites that are perfect for artists. And so I've included links for my favorite reference photo sites as well. You could choose to simply draw from these reference photos or trace a reference photo. I'll include some links in the description to videos that teach you how to do that, or use the traceable that I provided. And again, I'll include a link for a video for tracing that. So to recap our techniques, I just want to show you a few of the petals that you didn't fully get to see in the last video. Here you see that I'm coming on wet on dry, and I'm getting a nice hard edge, just carefully working along the stamen. And then I'm going to grab my water brush and just soften the edge of that. So you can see I've got a hard edge on one side, soft edge on the other side. Then I see this little curve shape. I'm going to kind of do the same thing. You can see there is already a little bit of water there automatically softening things, but I'm going to come back over it with my water brush and just soften things a little bit more. And then once again, a little bit of darkness up here, and I'll soften the edge with my water brush, which is really just another paintbrush, but I've got just water on it. Then I did this hard edge shape that you did watch already. And then it gets a little interesting here. So I'm going ahead, working wet on dry and softening the edge. Then I'm going to come through here with some paint and create these like creases and folds within the flower petal. And then I'm softening it once again with my water brush. But things did go a little bit goofy as I did that, didn't they? So I had to add a little more paint to that shape. And that is a situation you could have done that, or I could have done it, I should say, in 2 layers rather than all in one shot. I could have done that first hard edge shape and then come back after it was dry and added those soft shapes, but it did work okay. I want to add a little bit more pink in this area, and so I'm just, again, getting some of that pinky color on there. Some of it was purple. I'm just coming in and getting a nice soft edge there, and then I'm using some dilute paint to just drag a little bit of pink kind of along the edge here, because I feel like I would like to have a little bit more pink in this shape. Just feel like it's almost too yellow, so I'm just going to come in, kind of go back and forth between my 2 brushes. So I'm kind of getting a combination of like hard and soft lines here as I apply my paint, and then come back in with some water and just soften things. So while these petals dry, I'm going to go ahead and work on the leaves, and I'm going to be using a little bit more of a wet on wet technique with those. And I'm going to actually do more like a yellow-green. So let's go ahead and grab our green. Well, actually, let's get the yellow. I know there's a little bit of red in there. That's okay. I'm going to just throw it into this well. And so yes, this yellow is warm because I have a bit of red in there, and I'm okay with that because I do like warm greens. Let's move this out of the way, and let's give ourselves a little more space to mix here. So I'm going to grab some green from here. I can even just grab some of my blue. I could grab phthalo blue or ultramarine blue. Either one is fine. And just get a nice green color here going. Okay, that's way darker than I was planning. So I'm just going to throw some of it over here and just get a little bit more of this yellow kind of flowing in here. Like I say, I want a more yellow green to start with, and then I'll come back in and throw a little bit more of my darker greens afterwards. So for my leaves, I'm also going to be using kind of the wet on wet technique to get started. So I'm just going to go ahead, wet them all with a little bit of water. And then I'll drop my greens into them. You can even give it a little bit of a serrated edge if you want to, but it's not necessary. So I'm just going to go around and just, like I say, get the green on there. I like this bright spring green. Why don't we just go ahead and drop in some of our dull greens as well at the same time. Maybe we'll keep these nice and simple and kind of loose so we don't put as much detail in them. Just kind of dropping in kind of the effective veins here while I'm working wet on wet. Oh, if you want to get the exact color I've got here, sorry, let's just see. I don't have a lot of this dark green made up. I'll probably make up more as I go, but that's my dark green. As you can see, I don't have a lot of it going, and my light green is more like this. I'll probably have to make more of my dark green right away here because, like I say, I feel like I am kind of on the little bit of little side. I didn't make up very much. Before we keep painting, I'm going to go ahead and make up a little bit more of my dark green. It's not a great thing to leave that light green kind of sitting there because I want to get this into it, drop it in while it's still wet. So I'm just going to quickly grab more of my ultramarine blue, a little bit more of my yellow. Yes, being very messy here. Just trying to work really quick. And I think I might throw a little bit of red in. Okay, let's just go ahead and drop this in. Slightly different green than what I had before, but kind of close. I know I need more, but I just want to get some dark green dropped in here before everything gets completely dry. So I'm just using the tip of my brush to create a little bit of detail, wet on wet detail. So I'm not doing anything too dramatic here, but I'm getting a little bit of nice loose detail. And I'm enjoying the fact I've got some of those kind of white sections where the light's just kind of hitting, and I'm not going to fill that in because I think that's the beauty of slightly looser watercolor. So I'm just going to let that be. And if we wanted to create a little harmony, we could drop some of our pinky our purple color in here. Why don't we try a little bit of that purple color maybe along this section here. It'll just harmonize things a little bit, you know, create a nice kind of neutral but slightly red shadow. I'll do a little bit along the edge because I don't even mind if it starts to look a bit red, because sometimes roses have a slight bit of red in the leaf occasionally. More so, I would say, you know, towards the end of the season or maybe the beginning of the season. Yeah, even in the spring, there's a bit of red there, but let's just leave it like that. I don't want to go too overboard here. I'm getting a bit of a puddle. Soak that out. Sorry, I'm all over the place. Let's get myself tidied up here. It might be too late to drop red in here. Let's just see. I think in the dark side, it might still be okay. I think we're going to be okay here. You got to be really careful once you've let something sit that long, whether you can, you know, it's hard to say whether you can drop that extra color in, but I think we got away with it because I didn't put too much. And we'll go re-wet these shapes since it's been a bit since we wet them. I'll just go ahead and drop some of that nice bright green. I'll do that on all of them. I think I can work fast enough that I can get away with just getting all the green on here and then coming back in and adding all of our darker green. I'm using the Arte Gria brush for this just because it is a nice soft brush and I feel like it helps me get a little bit more of an abstract or loose effect to my painting, but you can see I was definitely going back and forth between my brushes today. So there's really not a right or a wrong way to do this. Okay, I have a few more leaves there, but I'll come back to them in a second. I'll just maybe just grab my same brush, my Arte Gria brush, and yes, I'm kind of messing up my green here, so I'll throw a little bit more of my red. Like I say, I don't very often use the ultramarine blue. I'm using it because it's in my palette, but you really don't need both blues. So just dropping some of this in along the edge here, kind of creating a little bit of a vein, and we'll take some of it up here. Again, kind of create some loose veins and then just let things alone. Let them be alone. I'm not saying that right. Leave things alone. Okay. A little bit more. I don't mind if I actually get this one darker because it is kind of underneath, so it could be more in shadow. So I'm going to just go ahead and deepen this and just play a little bit there. And then I'm going to come in with my kind of reddish purple color, and I'm going to grab my other brush just because I had the more red on it. Let's just grab some of this one. Just drop it in there. Again, maybe towards the tip, maybe towards the edges. Ooh, that really is flowing. I'm going to just soak a little bit of that out. Don't want it to be too overboard. I'll probably drop a bit more green on top of that. There we go. Not perfect, but better. Maybe I'll throw some light green in there. That's me fixing a, oh dear. Okay, me not fixing a mess, me making a bigger mess. Sorry, everybody. I was not planning to put such a big drop of green, light green in there. We're getting it to work. Just clean the brush, soften things a little bit. I think I'm gonna leave it alone. I think I'm okay with it overall. It's kind of pretty, and if I keep working at it, I'll overwork it. Just going to soak a little bit of this out, and then I'm going to put a little bit more pink. I really don't mind having more pink on this one because, as I said, when I'm saying pink, more like my shadow color over here is, whoops, the one I've been grabbing when I'm adding my greens. I'm just going to zoom out so you can see my palette because I realize I'm kind of too zoomed in. You can't see what I'm doing. All right, let's leave that alone. Now there are a couple little small leaves here. Oh, we need some pink in this one too. Let's just put a little tiny bit along this edge here. Not too much because it is starting to dry at the top. So let's go ahead and just very, very carefully with this brush, add a few little details, or a few little leaves rather. I'll just put some light green and then I'll come in with my dark green into these little tiny little leaves here. Something like that. And then some of this dark. Kind of extending that shape out a little bit. Just taking a little artistic license with these leaves. Okay, I think I'm gonna let that be. I'm almost digging into that petal there, or I am, but I think I'm gonna let that be. I'm gonna come in and do this stem. Now the stems on roses are often kind of a green anyways, right? Kind of a deep green. So let's just see, I've kind of got a mixture of pigments on my brush, but I'll quickly paint the stem and then I'll come back in with a bit of the darker green. There is very often a little bit of pink on those little thorns, right? If that's what you call them, or the little, yeah, I guess they're thorns. Let's just drop a little pink there. And put a little bit up here. And then we will throw a little bit of dark green. As you can see, I'm kind of running between all of my pigments here. The dark green, the light green, and the pink. Or I should say the purple, kind of purpley pink color. Good enough? Yeah, I think so. I don't want to overwork it. So I'm going to let the leaves dry. And then I'll come back and I'll do the center, and maybe we'll add like just a very, very, very slight bit of background. I don't want to overdo it, but maybe we could make some background. We'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry and I'll be back. All right, so I'm going to start the center now, and I'm using a couple of smaller brushes. These are size 6, but you could even go smaller. And I'm going to mix up some colors quick here. So I'm going to want to have my vibrant yellow to still be an option, because there's definitely some vibrant yellow going on here. So I'm going to be using vibrant yellow, and let's just take a bit of this coral color, and let's see, where can we put it? Let's make ourselves kind of a golden color over here. So I'll just take the coral and then I'll throw some of the yellow in there. Won't use up all of my coral color. I'll just take straight from the quinacridone rose, which is kind of the same idea, but a little more red, and maybe a tiny bit more. I can always grab a little bit of the coral color as I'm working if I want something a little more vibrant. This is going to be more of a dull orange, which I think will probably work fine for these little stamen. And then I'm going to be working with my bright yellow as well. So, and I can make, maybe it would be good to have an in-between of these two. Do I do it in here? I could probably just mix it on my painting, but you could easily make something that's in between the yellow and the kind of rusty color that I just made. But I'm going to go ahead and start out with some of that bright, intense yellow and just fill it in. So I probably will just work dry on dry for this part, and then I'll come back and fill in with a little bit of wet on wet after. But let's just get these nice bright yellow in here. I'm going to leave the center partly dry, where I see kind of almost like a pastel yellow right there, and then I'm just going to dot around, like jumping my brush around kind of in a dotting motion, and come all the way around the sides here. And actually then I'm going to start doing some little stripes, if you will, because I can see a little bit of color between the yellow, and I might come in with a bit of that pink. For now, I'm just going to start with just kind of basically creating all these little stamen, and I'm doing them like little lines with my yellow, bright intense yellow. And then I'll be doing these little tiny circles here for the pollen. Whoops, that's very concentrated. Let's just rinse my brush off a bit more. I'm going to bring a little bit of this color right over into my yellow. Then I'll have something in between, just like so. I'm just kind of dropping it in right now, and I'll come in with my yellow in a minute. This is just giving me some bits of orange. This is probably actually almost as orange as I'm going to want to get. It's looking pretty dark already, so let's just kind of carry on with this. I'll probably have to come in and throw a little bit more pink in, like I say, in a few spots, but let's just get all these little stamen in here. It's a little bit darker down here. There's some nice kind of golden shadows happening down in this area here. So I'm just going to drop some more of that gold color. And I can probably even, where it's super dark, so right here about, I'm seeing it as being the darkest, so I can drop in just a little bit more of that color. So that's more of my, like, I don't know, rusty orange color. And just drop tiny little bits of that into the tips of these, not too much. I'm going to kind of let that partly dry, and then I'm going to come back with my yellow and kind of fill in the remaining areas, and then probably try and get a bit of that pink color at the very end. So let's just go with that for now. And I'll eventually need some green too, but we'll get there. I'm just going to come in and get some more of the brighter yellow and kind of just fill in some of these gaps. Dry my brush a bit. I don't want it to be so wet that everything like mingles together a bit too much. I do want to have that yellow and the gold color like lightly mingling, but I don't want to have it disappear, right? I want to have some different differentiation between these little colors here. So I'm just kind of coming in and kind of more or less bouncing my brush to kind of get that texture happening. I think I'm kind of happy with that, and I probably have to let it dry before I get any more detail. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put a little bit of this darker color up here because I do feel like some of these, when I look at the reference photo, I do see some more of this darkness kind of over on this side. And that comes down in some places as well, something like this. Yeah, that's shaping up. I'm going to let it dry, and then I'll come in and add some more detail. Actually, you know what? One thing I really prefer to get on now is I think I need to come a little bit closer to my shadows here. I feel like I've got a little gap. You probably can see that, right? These need to come, kind of fill that in. There's really not any gap between the shadows and the stamen themselves. So I'll just put a tiny little bit more there. So I'll just go ahead and let it dry, and then I'll come back in and do the final details. All right, so everything is dry. So I'm going to come in and fill in just the areas that I still need to back here. I'm going to be taking a little bit of my shadow color actually and filling in. Probably need a little more red in my shadow color here because I kind of lifted the top off as I mentioned before, but ultramarine blue sinks. It's a very heavy pigment, so it always is at the bottom. Sometimes you have to add more of whatever your other colors are to keep things the right color as you work your way closer to the bottom. And I tend to not work with, as I said, ultramarine blue as often. So I'm going to come in here and just fill in some of these little gaps with this kind of pinky color, and that's going to create the effect of there being like the flower kind of being able to see it between the little stamens there. Just do that in a few places. Sometimes I'm going on top of my little darker lines, and sometimes I'm going on the lighter ones just so that I have a bit of variety. Back here, I did more of the dark, or sorry, kind of went on top of the light areas and everything's just dark, but you can see as I'm kind of coming around in here that I'm doing a little bit of both. And I only really want to do that where there is more shadow. In this part of the flower, there is some, but I think I'm going to be a little bit lighter while I do it. So I'm probably going to just put a little more water on my brush, dab it off on my paper towel. So I'll just basically dilute that color a little bit so it's a little bit less strong back in here. See that? So it's kind of more of a light pink. I'll put a little bit kind of back in here too, kind of almost creating that shadow in a few more places, just to kind of fill that in just a little bit more. And I think I'm pretty much going to call this center part done. Let's add just a tiny bit more darkness, maybe right here. I'm going to use this same color and just put just a tiny little bit of detail into the tops of these little stamen shapes. I'm just kind of coming in kind of all in this area here, just adding a little more darkness and just kind of like a few little specks here and there, not too much. Just adds a little bit more definition to those. And then I'm going to come in and do the center of this, and it's got green, so I'm just going to go ahead. I think I'm going to work kind of wet on wet, so I'll just wet this center here. And not sopping wet, but it's got a bit of wet, and then I'm just going to drop a bit of green in a few places. So I'm dabbing the green off on my brush so I don't have too saturated a paint brush here, And then I'm going to drop in just a little bit of green for the center. So I'm kind of just putting little bits in here and there. There's definitely a nice light area on the top there. The green is kind of more along this area here. Just maybe a tiny bit more right there. Just drop that in there. Yeah, I like that. And then I'm going to put in a tiny little bit of my orangey color. So I'm just picking up over here in my palette that kind of rusty color. And I'm just putting a very small amount kind of right here where it is rusty already, but I want to soften that because I'm seeing a little bit of like a soft shadow kind of working its way towards the center of this right here. So kind of something like that. Okay, things are almost looking pink. Just soften that a bit more. Lift it just a bit. I honestly expected that to be a little more orange. I'm just going to put a little bit more of my goldish color on top. A little bit of yellow, so just picking up some of the yellowy gold out of my palette here. Just sticking just, I don't know, a little bit, just to drop it on there because I feel like that was turning a bit too pink. I think that's better. Alrighty, so what else do we want to do to this? I think I'm actually pretty happy with the flower as a whole. Maybe I'll just drop a tiny little bit more green in the center just to help give it a little bit more definition. Can maybe even try a tiny little bit of the dark green, not too much, but just a tiny bit. And then I'm just going to use a damp brush and just kind of lift a little bit so I get softer edges here. I want to just soften that. So using my damp brush, just very gently softening that dark green. All right, so let's go ahead and add our background, and I'm going to go ahead and wet the whole thing. I'm going to turn my page just because it's easier to get my hand over here and have a little more water control. So I'm just going to go quickly fill this in. I'm using a nice soft brush. This one holds a fair amount of water, but there's no reason that you have to use this smaller brush. You could even use a wide brush. Something like a 1-inch flat would get the job done even faster. If you'd rather use that, you definitely can. So I'm just going to quickly fill this in with my water, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to add my color. And I'm going to just come up to that leaf there. I'm not going to come around because I think that leaf comes close enough to the bottom. It's almost creating a little bit of a blockade for the paint, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. So I'm not getting right to the very edge of all of the flower. I can do that with my pigment once it's on my brush. So just something like that. Okay, you're going to see what, woo, got a little on the flower there. Gotta be careful because if you get any on the flower, the paint will just go poof in. I think I'm okay because it wasn't much, but if I got much on there, I'd have to kind of let that dry. All right, so then I'm going to come in with my light green first, and I'm going to drop that in, and I'm going to work closest to the flower and let the paint just kind of flow around. I'm not going to do the background all the way to the very edge of the paper, I don't think. So let's just drop in some of that green, and you can see it's just moving around. And when I come over to the leaves, I'll probably end up adding some other colors just to make the leaves pop more. So that's more where I'll probably put more of the purple, but we'll see. Let's just get this color on first. And we're just going to go ahead and do the green, and then we'll decide where we want to drop our other colors in a quick second here. Again, I think I feel like I'm more control if I turn my page, so just bear with me here. Go ahead and turn your page too if you're following along. It's the easiest way to do it sometimes. Now you can see I'm coming with my brush right up to the flower with that green. And just doing that. You can see I'm working fairly light, like I don't have a ton of pigment going yet. I'd rather start on the light side and make this a very soft background, and then if I decide I want to go further, I can, but I'd rather not go too crazy too soon. So just going something like that. So now I can move a little bit more flowy and loose now that I've got that area filled in with green. And I'm just going to come up into here because again, we wet this area and we want kind of to have some flow. We probably could almost have left this section and come back to it after, but I'm just going to come in here and just keep dropping a little bit more green right up till I get to that leaf, like so. And then I'm going to drop in some of this darker green. So I'm going to drop it in the areas where it's going to really make the flower pop, like right here, because it's a nice dark color against the bright pink. You know what? I might even pick up a brush that's a little bit more blunt on the tip instead of having a sharp tip, if that makes sense. So I'm picking up one of my Simply Simons, and this one's actually kind of getting old and dull, so it'll keep me from getting some of that. You saw those little lines I was getting there. That was just from the tip of the brush, which I could probably change my brush stroke a bit, but hey, why don't we just try this? I don't know, maybe I'll go back to it. I couldn't really decide which brush you prefer. I feel like I like the tip when I'm coming into these nice tiny little crevices, but I'll just have to be careful. I'll use the belly of the brush to kind of disperse the pigment a bit. I'll be okay. Drop a little bit more green. So I'm just kind of going back and forth between the two greens for now until I'm happy with the color. And then I probably come in and add a little bit of pink, but for now I'm just going to go back and forth, dropping that green in, get more of the dark underneath because it'd be more shadow below the painting. And this is where I do think I want to drop a little bit of pink in, so I'm just going to grab a different brush for that. So I'll just grab one of these ones and drop in a little bit of my kind of shadow color, especially kind of near the leaves, because I want to create a little bit of contrast and I want those leaves to pop out a little bit. So I'm going to put a little bit of red in there. And I have to be careful with when I do that because it's very easy to overdo or to like blend the colors too much. You can drop a little bit of color to disperse it, but you just have to be really careful that you don't over blend and overwork, because that's where you're going to get really muddy colors, which is okay to have a little bit of muddiness in the background because we do want the background to have a more neutral look so it kind of fades, but you just have to be careful when you're blending here, like I'm doing right now. Just gonna put a little more water here, get something a little more soft happening. Just push that around a little bit. Definitely muddy, but it's actually kind of pretty. I'm okay with that amount of muddiness here. Okay, let's move on into this other section here before it gets too dry. You know what, actually, before I do that, just put a little bit of green to get, or sorry, red. This is my purple, but I'm calling it red. It's kind of, you know, the color we use for our shadow. Just using a little bit of that to kind of disperse the colors and harmonize things a little bit at the bottom, but still keeping it fairly dark. Okay, hopefully we'll be okay with that. Let's come up here and work up here. So you can see I'm getting like a kind of a goofy edge here. The paint's flowing funny, but I can fix that because everything's still wet. So I'll just drop a little bit more of that in, and I'm gonna have to come in with a wet brush or this light green and kind of just get things just flowing together a little bit better up there. I put a little bit more intensity right here. All right, I'm going to grab my slightly larger brush with the water to just kind of blend this around. So I'm happy with the way it kind of washes away into the white part of the background. Kind of like so. Okay, now we're going to work in this section. And you can see it's kind of drying a little bit funny, but that's okay because it hasn't fully dried. We can just kind of cover it while it's in this state. Like so. You can see we're going to be okay. Just get more of this light green and water, and then I'll come in with my pinks because this is where I think it would look really nice to have a bit more pink in the background, just to kind of help make the leaf pop a little bit. I don't mind a bit of muddiness here towards the edge of the painting. It will kind of help push it out of focus, which is what we want at the edge of the painting. So just something like that. You know what? I might come to the very edge here with my water and my paint instead of leaving that little white strip. This is where if you've taped it down, it might be a little bit better, but oh well. We're just working with what we've got here. I got a little bit of a hard edge there because it was starting to dry. Okay, let's just go with that, leave it alone, and then we can come in and fill these sections here. But before I do that, I'm noticing I'm getting some hard edges here where the paint is kind of coming up to the light section of my painting. So I'm just gonna blend that out a little bit with my water and just a little bit of pigment, just kind of move that pigment around. Oof, I'm gonna get a funny edge here, so I gotta kind of be careful. Put a little bit of green. Okay. That was a bad move. You're seeing when I'm coming in when it's starting to dry, which is not a good stage to come and rework. So I have to come up to the edges where I've kind of got the wet and I should say wetter areas and then partly dry areas kind of mixing together. I'm going to get a bloom here. So I'm going to have to come in and just put a little bit of water and clean this, just gently soften where these edges are meeting and kind of probably wet this whole shape probably in order to not get a bloom. So that's not ideal with all these colors here, but that's what we have to do because I can see it's getting very close to blooming. Basically, I didn't work fast enough or watch that what was happening with the way the pigments were drying over here. Kind of funny. I probably should have left it. That would have been the smarter thing. When something like that happens, probably better to just let it dry and come back in when it's dry and you can maybe fix it. But I went ahead and dealt with it while it was wet. So that's why I have to come in and reapply my water and even a little bit of pigment to kind of fix the problem. The pigment's just to deepen the colors. You could just use water, but then I'm thinking mine will get too washed out. So that's why I'm adding a bit of green. Okay. Don't do what I do what I say, and that is don't mess with it once it's starting to dry. Okay, I'm going to try and apply more water as I come into these shapes here so that they don't dry as quick. It's not going to be as big a deal because they're not as small. This actually, I'll do this one after. I'll just do these two that are kind of touching. Just get the water on there, and I can probably just use this big brush. Any brush really would be okay to come in and just fill in some greens, and then we'll come in with a dark green, and then finally, as you know, with the purpley pink. Okay, I'm quite wet. So just dab my brush off, and then I'll come in and put just a little bit more pigment, and then finally some more green here. Just drop the dark green in, move it around, do the same thing down here, put a little bit of dark green, move it around. And as I said, the lower sections of the painting, I do want them darker. So I'm okay with how dark I'm getting down here. I'll probably just put a tiny touch of this purple color, a few spots, not too much because I don't want to go overboard and draw too much attention to that section down there. Just blend it in a little bit. It will make a muddy color here, but that's okay. Again, the muddy color will kind of help this recede a little bit. I'll just soak up a little bit of my paint here. And then I'll just come in and do this last section. I could probably almost use the muddy color I have on my brush, which is what I'm going to do. It's kind of a muddy color, and I'll just drop in my greens and call that good. So light green, then dark green, and may or may not even put any pink in here at all. We'll see, because I already have that tiny touch of it with my slightly dirty brush, right? Let's put it just a tiny bit, just create a little bit of harmony, make it look like it's flowing back, kind of connecting to that section of pink back here. Just throw a little bit more dark green on top, because again, we're getting that pink a little too vibrant. Now, I probably should have gone ahead and just filled down to there, but I hadn't made that decision till I was already at the top. So it's fine. I'll just have to let that be for now. I'm noticing I'm getting a little bit of a bloom here, and I'm thinking I might just wait and fix that when it's dry. So let's just let it dry, and then we can come in and see if we have any problems that we want to fix. So you can actually see me fix it in maybe a better state than coming in. Like if I start messing around with this right now, I'll probably get blooming happening both ways. So I'm just going to let that dry. That's the better way to fix a situation than to do what I did over here. All right, so if you want to see how I can go ahead and fix that tiny little bloom up there, or bring my water all the way to the bottom of this painting, I'm going to show you that now. So everything is dry, which is what we want. And I'm grabbing my soft brush, and I'm just going to come in and cover this section here with water, just at this top area. You could turn your painting, which you probably didn't get a bloom in exactly the same spot as me, so never mind. That was kind of funny. Anyways, so I'm going to just wet that, and then I can come in with a brush, and I can use a slightly firmer brush if I want to for this part, and just gently rub a little bit of that section where it kind of went a little bit goofy. And if I like it just the way it is, I can just leave it. Or if I want to fill it in with a tiny little bit more color, I can just drop a tiny bit of color just kind of in that area. I'm going to want to be very careful as I come away from that area and into this area here, that I watch where that green paint goes, that I don't have a hard edge, because I've only got the water coming up to about there and there. So it looks like it's fine for now. If I wanted to really extend that green, I'd want to make sure that I extend my water past the green. So on this side, for instance, I'm putting the green a little further. And so I probably will just extend the water all the way down to here just to be safe. I'm also noticing, well, actually, I thought that was a funny shape at the side. I think it's okay. I'll just leave it like that. Anyways, and I have water coming out plenty far from here, so I should be okay, unless, of course, I want to drag more paint around than what I already have. I'm going to just grab a little bit of the dark green and drag it into here, but I think I'll be okay still. So I'm just going to leave it like it is, and then we'll move on to the bottom shape. Once again, I'm taking my soft brush, and if I bring my water past where I'm wanting to put my pigment, so I could come up here, say with the water, fill the water in here. So I'm coming all the way to the bottom of the page this time. As long as I get my clear water running past the area I need to fix, and you want to move it, like have it run a fair ways away. I'm going to stop right here. I'm not going to worry about that tiny little bit there. Anyways, you want the water to either come up to an area that can be like a hard edge, like this one, or you want that clear water to be, like I say, extending well past where you're planning to do your repair. Then I'm going to take a firmer brush once again. Oh, this one's got a little pigment on it. That's okay. I'm going to do a little bit, tiny little bit of scrubbing here. In fact, I could even, this is a little bit riskier, but this brush here is a even firmer brush. It'll really give it a scrub. And so I could just scrub gently. I don't want to have a goofy scrub edge. I'm going to have to do it in a bit of a circular way. If I do it too like that linear, it's going to show. So I'm going to have to be a little bit circular to get a nice smooth transition happening here. I can't speak English very well, it seems, these days. I keep stumbling over my words. Anyways, I'm just going to go like that, and just going to scrub up to the top gently, not as hard as I was. And then I'm just going to come in and drop more color, just like we did before. You could even see it's actually not even bad just the way it is it? Okay, I don't usually like putting the lighter green too much on top. It can kind of start to look pasty. I just find the yellow in it can, I don't know. I'm not as crazy about putting too much light green on top of dark green. Let's bring that down to the bottom here, and then we'll throw in some dark green. It's working okay. Okay, then the darker green up here, and we might even drop a little bit of our reddish color. What do you guys think? Does it need a little reddish color? I think it does, because it just needs to harmonize it a little bit. I mean, I've got some coming up to here. I'll just put a tiny bit, so just lift a little bit of this green out, tiny little bit of lifting, and then just grab my brush. Just grab a little bit of that color. You can see it's already separated clearly there, but let's just drop a little bit of this in here. Ooh, that's very strong. It's starting to dry out. So in that case, I'm going to want to just gently blend around a little bit more with my green brush so that I don't have that too stark there. We do want to have a bit of a neutralized effect down here below the flower. Come up a little bit there, fill in that little gap. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. And I think that I'm okay. I think everything's damp enough. I'm actually seeing a slight line there where the water is kind of ending. So because I can see that, could be that my paint water here isn't perfectly clean. You definitely should have perfectly clean water. Mine's getting slightly muddy, or it could just be a slight bit of pigment in my brush. Whatever the case, I'm just gonna put a little bit more water here and just soften where I'm seeing that kind of edge there. And then I'll just gently dab the edge here so I don't get a funny edge happening with my paper towel. Again, that could just be because of my paintbrush or my water. We'll see. Anyways, I'm going to leave it like that. I don't expect to have any crazy things happening now. You can see there's a slight line there, but I'm not going to worry about that. But that's how you could go about fixing things rather than doing what I showed you earlier, where I kind of dove in where things were only partly dry. Bad thing to do. I mean, not the end of the world, but you know, a good opportunity to teach you what not to do. Now I'm just seeing I've got a little bit of a goofy edge here. This is totally optional fix, but I'm going to come in here and just, might even be able to soften it with my water brush, but let's just see. Putting that clear water on once again. I might not add any pigment this time. I might just come in with my brush and just make sure I'm happy with the transition. Yeah, almost could do with just a tiny drop of green, like just a tiny drop of the light green right here. Ooh, that's a big drop. Try and be careful not to release as much of that as I was releasing there. Okay, I'm gonna call that good for there. And maybe just put a tiny little bit of water here because I feel like I'm gonna get a hard edge. I can almost see where the water is ending. So again, clear water is your friend when you're trying to avoid those hard edges. I feel like I'm getting picking up a bit of pigment. So I'll just gently dab it again with my paper towel because I think I'm lifting a little bit, and that's partly where I'm getting the extra hard edges from. Okay, let's just leave that be. If this was helpful, you might want to check out my watercolor playlist, where I'm gradually adding more videos like this one. In the meantime, I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye.